Anandamide, serotonin, norepinephrine, adrenaline, GABA, nitric oxide. You've got access to all of these hormones, neurochemicals, gases, and if you know how, you can turn them on at will. So in yesterday's Tribe Call, we discussed exactly that, how I ride these neurochemicals throughout the day, and you can too. To remind you, this is the 8 Decisions Tribe Call. This happens once a week at 7 a.m. Central. It would be great to see you there and become a part of this growing group of driven individuals, all wishing to optimize their mind and their body, and ultimately follow the 8 decisions that start with I've decided to optimize my energy and ends with I've decided to discover my purpose. You will also hear from a couple of our tribe members, one of whom had described how he had begun to see the benefits of working in our specific 8-person group tribes that we're trialing at the moment. And you'll also hear from somebody that has taken part on a number of occasions with the 8 Decisions walking meditation that is currently happening in Nashville at the moment. And as an aside, you can listen to this 8 Decisions walking meditation on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, I hope you enjoyed today's takeaways from yesterday's 8 Decisions Tribe Call. Thank you.
My apologies, my audio setup and everything is askew because I slept in this morning, and it actually feels quite good to have slept in. But I'm as unprepared as I have ever been on one of these calls, and it is part of life. Is we go through these little stages, and one thing that Dave, as you were talking about, what is it in these 8 decisions? This is what we call practice. What we are doing today on this call is when we practice. And practice, what does that mean to practice? There's some statements that I've heard over the years that really resonate with me, and that is living in survival mode. Living in survival mode, when you're living in that fear and you're living in that worry, and you can bring your state to a lower vibration. And honestly, when I woke up this morning, I had this fear because I was on our early pre-call, and I just had this survival instinct, like, oh my gosh, something bad is going to happen. I'm late. I'm not prepared. People are going to see me as who I really am sometimes, is irresponsible. But it's and when I say this survival instinct that kind of happens to all of us in our day-to-day, the practice, whether we're doing some breath work, we're doing a walking meditation, is the practice helps us get into the other state, this state of being in love with your future vision. And the reason the walking meditation exists is so all of us have the daily dose of being in this love state. And you're not going to fully experience what it's like unless you do the work, unless you do the practice, unless you sit down and in your own meditative way, think of a future self and be in love with that, and taking not only a past experience of love, but being in love with a future state, and starting to be in the creation mode. The creation mode is our ability to be in our minds in the right way from heart, and to create a future reality. And there's something to be said for all of us to be doing the practice. What is the practice of living in this future state and being in this love, this vibration? And I was doing a walk yesterday with many people that are on this call right here. And I was just reminded how much has happened for me in the last 14 days since I have been doing the walking meditation. And I feel this change. I feel this. There's things that I just can't explain, to be honest with you. It is quite magic. Things that are just lining up for me in ways that I just really don't expect. But we, as this team right here, we have to do the practice. I've been going through this like massive growth, and then there's those moments in time where I feel like somehow like I want to sabotage it because it's going so good, and it's like self-sabotage that we have within us that is like maybe not feeling worthy of deserving of the wins that we have. And so our subconscious is like, whoa, you're growing too strong. You're not good enough to do this. And I go through these not good enoughs. And now that I see others with the same self-saboteur in motion, it does. And I love how you use the word, you got to put your shoulder in it and just go right and go, push forward. And that is what we have to do. And you are, I've watched you talk about putting yourself out there, and now you're actually doing it. You're actually, investing in yourself to help build your brand, to get the content that you want out. And I'm watching you do that. I'm like, yes, this is the extra thing that I now need to keep going to, is watching others move forward. And to add to that, what Dave and I, we had some really good conversations on the business and what is the 8 decision in terms of this community that we're building, because it's so much more than we even articulate very well on these calls of what we are doing. And a part of what we are doing is bringing these people together and starting to align us with deciding on what this future state is. And then every week, filling out a form that is custom made for you. And this is a questionnaire that's going to be coming out this week. And I really want your participation on what this questionnaire is, because it's going to ask you questions like, do you have a fully formed 10-year vision? And you know what? To be honest with you, I don't really have mine fully shaped out either. So if you are watching me or hearing us, Dave and I, and everyone talking about this 10-year vision, this 10-year vision, don't think for a minute that we have this all figured out. I do have certain components figured out. And what I would like us to do is, when you see the questionnaire, I want you to be open to the fact that, hey, you don't have to have it fully fleshed out. But when you are in creation mode, the more you stay in creation mode, you're going to eventually be able to take all the paint that exists in your heart and to craft this future vision of you, and to really put time into painting every single day until it's fully fleshed out. But we're going to ask questions like, okay, if you're not fully fleshed out with a 10-year vision, what is something that you could strive for that would make a huge difference in your life? And what could you commit to over the course of the next quarter, that every single week you are moving incrementally forward? And that's why the scorecard is so powerful. When we put the work in, we get an outcome. And the outcome is simply forward momentum. And so the more of the forward momentum that we get with this whole audience, and what it will look like is, with your permission, when you get on these calls and you have a challenge that exists, let's bring up your scorecard and talk about what's working, and talk about some of your challenges in an open format like this, where you have other people that are going through this so we can experience share. So anyway, thanks for I'm doing a bit of rambling, and I'll let Dave take the floor.
Thanks, Robert. That was really interesting. Two things that came out of that for me. Number one, Matt's input there, which was really valuable, and it sort of reminds us both, doesn't it, Robert, that this is the kind of thing, as you've just said, actually, this is the kind of thing we want to do more of in these calls. It's not just about you or I. And that sort of, that whole it's not just about you or I thing is also aligned with our business, in the sense that we are absolutely stating that neither one of us are gurus. We don't have it all figured out. We've just decided to go on a journey. And we've created some steps for that journey. We've already done some of the work, but we still have loads more work to do, and we want others to follow. The other thing I wanted to mention as well is, when you were talking about the saboteurs, there is something that I will talk about in these tribe calls called saboteur psychology. The wonderful thing about this, if you build it into your life, is that eventually you will get to a point when you recognize when your mind is trying to saboteur your experience. You will recognize the voice. You will recognize the character that inhabits those statements. When you recognize it, that is awareness. It's a bit like, if you are going through AA, for example, awareness is key, isn't it? When you have that step one, awareness, so when you can sort of be aware of that voice and you can label that voice, that removes a whole load of power and energy behind the statements. And then what you do is you build in a practice that moves your brain from that, what is effectively fight-flight response, to a calming, rational, intelligent bit of the brain. But again, we will cover that off in future calls. Let me share the screen now, and we're going to talk, as I said, about just how I ride neurochemicals throughout the day. Robert does much of this as well. So I've called it riding the neurochemical waves. So what are the chemicals that we are looking at today? There's various other what I call the inner pharmacy. There's various other chemicals that are present in our body. But the point I want to make here is that you have control over the following chemicals. If you know how, you can switch these on at will. And so when you think about various different drugs that we can buy from the drugstore that will make us feel happy, that will bring us down from heightened states, that will calm us. All of those same drugs we can produce, and they're far more efficient, far cleaner and natural, and we can produce them inside our bodies. So the first one being norepinephrine, also known as noradrenaline. They're the same thing. And what that does is it increases your heart rate, it improves muscle tension, it increases energy. So you can probably figure out how that might be, and I'll talk about how you turn these on in a second. The second one that we're all familiar with, but often dopamine is presented in its negative fashion because of how we associate turning on dopamine by the scrolling on our phone. But once you know how to turn it on and get a clean flow of dopamine, it becomes a really positive chemical. It's great for improving your engagement with your tasks at hand. It's great for improving attention. It's great for things like pattern recognition. So it's not just a reward that your body's giving you. They often talk about that, don't they? This sort of reward drug. It also does a whole lot more, which is why when I turn it on in the morning and I get 3 hours worth of dopamine by doing this one thing, then I'm in a really good, flowing, focused, engaged state. The next one, endorphins. If you're into exercise, you know all about this already. What's amazing about endorphins is that not only does it reduce pain, but it also releases, obviously we know it's released in exercise, but it also aids your overall well-being. You're going to feel better if you get a chance to release these endorphins. Anandamide. Now this is what they describe as the bliss or delight drug. It actually improves things like lateral thinking, but it also reduces fear. The next one, oxytocin. We probably all know about this because it's often described as the love drug. And a bit like I was describing earlier in the call, you can turn on oxytocin simply by helping somebody. You don't have to go around hugging another human being, but I would recommend if you were able to do that on a daily basis, hugging another human being, it's going to bring reward as well. Let's face it, we should all do a lot more hugging. What I love actually about any time that I come over to Nashville and I see Robert and his friends, it's always a big hug that greets the conversation or begins the conversation. So it's it's an amazing chemical. It improves social bonding. It improves trust. The more we hug, the better. Now I say that with a smile on my face because I'm British, and we have to learn these things. What's next? Serotonin. We all know about this, and I don't mind telling you because I'm quite open about this. But in the late 80s, early 90s, I was part of the rave generation. So I got to experience floods of serotonin for another reason, and not necessarily a healthy reason, although I'd have to say part of it was healthy. But of course, if we know how to turn it on, serotonin, it improves our mood. It improves things like digestion. It improves your sleep, your memory, your sexual desire. There's a whole lot that you can do with serotonin. And lastly, we'll come to GABA in a second, actually, and I'll describe that in a little bit more detail. So how do I start turning on these chemicals? First of all, it's an early wake up. Now, what I learned, I always thought that that there's just a few of us that love waking up in the morning. As it happens, we are all designed to wake early. Even those that believe themselves to be night owls are designed to wake early. We are meant to wake when the sun rises. So every human is meant to do that. It's the only reason why those that are night owls are night owls is because they've trained themselves to do that. There's been perhaps a job that's required them to stay up late, or maybe they've got particularly excited over a period of time at university to stay up late to finishing reports. And that has had this associative element that's trained their brain to seek more energy at that time of the day. However, you can retrain it if you want to. You may not want to, but you can retrain your mind and your body to make use of the early wake up. And when you do that, you will achieve much more because you are aligning with your body's natural energy. So I wake early, let's say between 4:30, maybe a little bit earlier sometimes, and I sit up. For about a couple of minutes, I just sit up and I become aware of my thoughts. So there's no analysis, there's no judgment. I simply allow thoughts to materialize. And by the way, here's a little aside. When you do that and you learn how to remove the analysis of your thoughts, those thoughts will fade, even the really negative ones. It's only when we start to analyze them and start saying to ourselves like, oh, yeah, why am I thinking that? Why do I think that of that person? And where did that come from? Then that provides fuel. It's like adding fuel to the fire, and then you're going to keep going down a rabbit hole of thinking that same thought. If you can allow the thought to enter your mind and then not judge, not analyze, just allow it to be, I know it sounds simple, but you can do it, it will fade, it will disappear. It's almost as if the brain is going, oh, okay, we obviously don't need this thought anymore. You don't care about it, so that's good. I then get on the floor and I do some gentle movement. For those that were at the Nashville workshop, they saw some of the movement that I do. A kind attendee asked me to demonstrate, which I must admit I was inwardly resistant to because at the time my gut was really playing up and I knew that those moves would hurt. But I thought I've got to show these people how to do it. But this gentle movement that I do is something called the 5 Tibetan rites. I'll put these up actually on the 8 Decisions channel. At the moment, they are on my Evolution of Dave channel if you just put in the 5 Tibetan rites. And these are a series of really easy yogic moves. They flow from one to the other. Everybody can do them, as long as you're able-bodied, and you breathe through them. That's the whole point. You breathe in as you move, you breathe out, you move to another position. And these, of course, by doing this, will start to increase the oxygen in your body. You're moving the oxygen around the body. You're increasing and moving the blood flow. So you're setting up the day. I often talk about set it to seize it. You have to set up your body and mind in order to seize the day. Now, here comes the most beautiful one. Breath work. More and more breath work will come into these tribe calls. But I would highly recommend that you start to research. You'll see more and more breath work appear on the 8 Decisions channel. Start playing around with it, experiment with it, build it into your life. Very, very quickly, you will see huge results. Within 3 months of doing Wim Hof, when I started in 2017, within 3 months, I already realized my brain had changed. My spatial memory had improved. My actual memory had improved. I had this insatiable appetite for learning, and I can put that all down to breath work. So with breath work, what's amazing about this is that you can turn on oxytocin, you can turn on dopamine, serotonin, adrenaline, and one that I haven't yet mentioned, nitric oxide. Now, this is not nitrous oxide. This is nitric. Nitrous is the stuff that you put in balloons to help them rise. They'll also put a smile on your face. But I'm talking about nitric oxide that is present in our body naturally. But you can increase nitric oxide. And the amazing thing about that is that it is antiviral, antibacterial. It's a vasodilator, so it opens up the blood vessels, thereby increasing oxygen around the tissues where you need it. There are particular techniques that will increase nitric oxide, but the easiest one is humming. So before breath work, I always start with Om. So I simply inhale, and then I do a long Oh. And that in itself will increase nitric oxide in the body. I highly recommend that you build that in, especially before the winter months. Let's get this nitric oxide built up in your system. It will become a tool to prevent you, one of the many tools to prevent you from succumbing to illness. Next one, of course, cold showers. And that is when you will receive, as a reward, dopamine. And it's now been proven that you receive 3 hours. A perfect flow of dopamine will run through your system for 3 hours. And that will put you in this do, action, go mode, engaged. Your mind will be on fire. Now, perhaps this is silly. I don't know. I like it because I like coffee, but I then further add to this with caffeine. So I'm really loading up my body right now, as you can tell. And I say potentially it's silly because, of course, I didn't need this. I'm already on a high from breath work and cold showers. But of course, if I add caffeine to it, I add a few stress chemicals, norepinephrine and cortisol. Now, for me, that further gives me this excitable mood. Now, the downside to that is that I can then get locked into lots of different excitable activities and not focus on the task at hand. So caffeine is not for everyone. For some people, it really doesn't serve them. You will know whether it does to you or not. For me, it does. I only have one strong coffee in the morning, and that is it. I make a butter coffee because the fat then in the coffee then moves that caffeine to the brain, hence why I get very excitable. Now, let's move on to, very quickly, the daily flow. I make sure, therefore, that I get this wave of chemicals. Bearing in mind, I'm already, throughout the morning, I have enough. I've got enough chemicals that put me in a do, action, go state. But at some point, and I choose, by the way, to not sit on my backside for more than an hour. And I will get up and I might do a minute of squats or a minute of push-ups. That's all you need, by the way. You just need to increase your heart rate. So what I've got here is VILPA and HIIT. VILPA is the vigorous incidental lifestyle physical activity. That's research conducted by a friend of mine out of University of Sydney. HIIT, we all know what that is, high intensity exercise. Both of these are amazing because they can be done in short bursts, meaning we don't need to change into any particular kit. We all have time to do these sorts of exercises. And if you build these in at regular intervals throughout the day, it gives you that extra burst of energy, moving oxygen around the body. When you get back to work in front of a computer, you will be far more efficient. You will be able to get the work done with a clear head, rational mind. I'm adding this in as well because if what you're doing is loading your body up throughout the day with lots of excitable chemicals, I would highly recommend that you also build in some form of mindfulness or meditation. Now, mindfulness is the one that I tend to do throughout the day because it's easy. And when I say that, you can turn any activity into a mindful activity. You know, if you've got a chore to do, like vacuuming the house, that can become mindful. All you need to do is tap into your senses and breathe through it. And we'll talk about this on another session, but you then get these various different chemicals, GABA, dopamine, serotonin. So it's very easy to build into your day. Short dose is the key. This is the last slide now. And I say that because you want to, in the same way that I describe, you know, you've got this huge load of dopamine. At some point, you're going to want to counter that. Just bring that down a bit. At some point, you might have huge doses of cortisol. So therefore, you want to, in the next couple of hours, just do an exercise that will just bring those cortisol levels down. I'm a big believer that all stress is good for us in short doses, so long as we get a period for our body to repair and recover. And that's what this whole short dose is talking about here. Allow yourself short doses of stress. Your body and mind will be challenged. Your body and mind will then have to adapt, which is why exercise works. When you pump your muscles, you are stressing the muscle. The body is then realizing it needs to put more oxygen into the muscle. And therefore, it's adapting, it's changing, you're growing your muscle. So think of it in the same way when it comes to your mind. Your mind needs to be challenged. It needs stress. Stress is good for us. It's only bad for us if we have prolonged periods without recovery. Same as exercise. There we are. So I hope that resonates. I hope that's useful for you. We will be talking more about this in Tribe Calls. Do reach out to me as well if you want to get any hints or tips on the sorts of exercises that I've mentioned here. There we are. My ramble over. Robert, do you have anything?
Dave, that was so perfect. You know, a lot of those things that you talk about, you know, I just kind of tend to forget. You know, we have something in our homes that is a quick way to put a little dopamine in our bodies, and that's the cold shower. And it is something that a tool that I use every day, and it is so helpful for us, for me to at least just be in that certain state. Well, guys, thanks everyone for getting on this call today. I want to say a big thank you to Dave for covering for me a bit since I was a little bit late. I want to tell you guys is we are working on a very important date, a full day workshop. It will be a very powerful event to prepare us for 24. And I'm working on a venue. It's looking like the date will be December 2nd. Most likely that is a Saturday. Worst case, it will be on a Sunday. I'll be needing some help. I'll be needing some volunteers to help us with the event and to put on this event. It will be a life-changing experience to prepare yourself for the best year you've ever had, to take us one step closer to achieving our vision, our dreams. And I'm so excited to bring it to you when we are ready. But it is coming. I have it on the calendar, and I'm just walking through venues. If you have a venue that really resonates for you, please let me know. The place that we did it last time is not available the day we want to do it, but I have a very good lead that I'm hoping to go see today. And this facility would be very powerful, life-changing place to do this event. So I just ask that you guys put a little prayer out in the universe that we are doing this for the right reasons and to help people, and that everything will just come together as it should. So anyway, thank you everyone, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.